Okay, so welcome back. This is part 6 in our series where we're going to help you understand the wonderful world of 3D computer graphics. And I encourage you to look at the previous videos in the series where we showed you some of the basics. We showed you this wonderful free 3D software, professional grade software called Blender. We showed you how to install it and some of the basics, how to get around. And in previous videos, we showed you how to start modeling things, some of the tools you're going to need to model things. And in this video, we're going to take that one step further, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into modeling and building objects. You can see here we've got a model of a room in a house. And we're going to show you how to do that in this video. And it might look kind of complicated, but actually it's really very straightforward. And we're just going to use some of the 3 or 4 modeling tools we talked about in previous videos. And we're going to look at how you would approach this. And you can see here we've got doors, and the doors open and close. And we've got windows. And you can see we've got some of the details in the windows. We're going to show some simple techniques on how to do this. And you'll be able to extend these to build an actual building, a house, or an office, or whatever, using these same techniques. So I encourage you to stick around and learn a bit about how to do some modeling. So here we are in our default scene in Blender as you start it up. And you can see we've got our default cube. And we're going to look at we'll start out by building a room. A typical room, and it's going to have doors and windows, and it's going to have wall thickness and everything else. So let's think about how we might build a simple room in Blender. Now you might look at this cube and say, hey, we already got it, right? We got a cube, we're done. Well, not so fast. As we're going to show, there's better and more usable methods that will help you make a much better model. The first thing we're going to look at, and as we mentioned before, you really need to make reasonable dimensions because as we said before, dimensions are really important. Not a lot of people mention them, but dimensions are really important because, you know, we humans, we see things every day and they kind of stick in our subconscious and we know what looks right and what looks wrong. And dimensions are a big part of that. And, you know, we're talking about making buildings and rooms and doors and windows. Most of us have seen these for many years and we know what to expect. And if we see something that doesn't match that, it kind of subconsciously might make us think, hey, something's wrong. So we're going to first focus on getting our dimensions right. So here we've got our default cube, and we're going to look at a few methods that will make it easier for us to work with dimensions. All right. So I'm going to go, as we said before, to the top-down view on the z-axis. I'm looking down at my object. And you can see this grid here. All right. Now, as we said before, you can set the dimensions you're going to want to use by going over here to the scene properties, this little cone here with a circle, scene properties. And we're going to use, in our case, the imperial. You can use metric if you want. And I'm going to set it to feet. And with it set to feet, each grid is going to be 1 foot. And you can click on the object and go up here to this arrow, this left arrow, and select the item tab. And you can go down here and you can see the dimensions of this cube are 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And that makes sense because this major grid is 1 foot, which means one foot here and 1 foot here. So that's 2 feet. All right. So you can use that grid, and we're going to use that grid to help us make measurements. Now, one thing you might want to do to make these grids a little bit more visible is go up to Edit, Preferences, and on Interface, the very first option is this drop down for display, and under here is line width. And if you set it to, if it comes up as default, this is kind of difficult to see maybe. I've set mine to thick to make that a little bit more visible. So you might want to do that. So now that we've got that, we can use those grids to make our measurements. And we're orthogonal. It's got fractions of a foot. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So each of these minor grids is 1 inch. So pretty good. We're all set to go and we can make nice measurements. Now, if that's not good for you, another thing you can do is you can add a reference image in the background, as we showed before, and you can add a grid, and you can customize it to whatever you want. This is just basically a grid. I made this is an image I made in GIMP or Affinity Photo or whatever, and it's a grid with major and minor marks just like this. So you can use a grid that's customized to what you want. Again, we're going to use the default grid that's given to us by Blender. Another thing that I like to use is a ruler. And again, that's just a reference image. You can go on the internet, you can find an image of a ruler, you can customize it, and you can add it as a reference image. This is nice because it's got actual numbers. Whatever you need, you can do. You could also, if you have a ruler and you have a printer with a scanner, you can just put the ruler on the scanner and scan it and get an image of an actual ruler. Up to you, but that's a bunch of different choices. So let's take a look at how we're going to build the simple room that we showed in the introduction. So you might think we got the cube. We're going to delete the cube, and instead we're going to go to the top-down view, and we are going to add a mesh plane. All right, we're going to use a plane to make our building, and we'll show you why this might be a really good choice. So if I select my plane, I've got my location, rotation, scale, and dimensions, and again, it's 2 feet by 2 feet by 0. So let's say that I've taken out my tape measure and I've measured the room that I want to build, and it's actually 12 feet wide by 15 feet long. All right, so 12 in the X by 15 in the Y. So I can click on this, type in 12, and then click on this and type 15, and now I have the floor of my room. So now one thing that we're going to want to do, and this is why it's probably better to start with a plane, and that is because we're going to want to use walls with a thickness. Because if we're going to have a door and you open a door and there's no wall thickness, you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not a good room. So how are we going to make walls around this room? Well, we can use the tools that we talked about before. I'm going to select this in object mode, go to edit mode, and I'm going to go into edge select mode, and we're going to use our favorite tools down here. We're going to use the loop cut. Now, how thick are the walls going to be? Well, if you take out your ruler and look at a wall in your room, it's probably something like 5 inches. I'm not sure what that is in metric, but in my case, it's about 5 inches. That could vary a little bit, but 5 inches looks kind of realistic. As we said before, we've got our 1 foot marker here. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can do a loop cut that's 5 inches in. We'll select our object, go into edit mode, and we'll go into edge select mode, and we're going to select this loop cut tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover here, and I get one right down the middle. I'm going to left click, and here I've got my loop cut and slide options, and instead of 1, I'm going to click this right arrow to make it 2, and you can see now I've got 2 vertical edge cuts. So if I go back to the selection, you can see I get my gizmo, and what I can do is I can scale those, and it will move those away together. So now I can have my left and right walls, and I can drop this somewhere around where it's 5 inches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's close enough, right? We can do the same thing for the top and bottom ones. Left click, select 2, go up to my selection, scale it, and make it so that that looks like a nice square. And now we've got our 4 walls. So pretty nice, we're pretty much all set. Well, if that's all we got, we could make our room right now. So how would we do that? Well, if I'm in edit mode and I'm face select, I select this, I can hit H, And now all I'm left with is with all of the wall faces. So I can hit A, and I can go to my extrude tool, and I can extrude this up. So pretty nice. We've got our room, and all we have to do is measure. Typical, you might have 7 or 8 foot ceilings, depending on where you are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can adjust this however you want. So that's a nice way to make a room. But I'm going to Control Z because we're going to add a lot more detail. But you can see how that idea of just going on the top down and just making loop cuts to define walls and whatever is a really nice way to do it. And then when you're done, you just extrude. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding doors and walls. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to do another loop cut. And down here on the right, I've got a door. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to run it down here. And my door is just under 3 feet wide. It's about 32 inches. So here's 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet. And I'm going to bring it back a bit. And that is now defining this face is defining my door. Now I've got another door over here. So I'm going to left click and drag. And it's about 2 feet from the wall. So here's about 1 feet, 2 feet. And I've got the left edge of my door. And I'm going to do the same thing. I've got 1, 2, 3. So my right side of the door is there. So now I've defined where my doors are. Okay, I've got one door here and I've got one door here. And as we can see later, we'll be able to use that to make openings for the doors. Now I've also got some windows. So let's go down here and let's define the windows. In my case, I've got a window that's about 1, 2 feet from this wall. And the left side is about here. We can get detail later on, but this face right here is now going to define our one window. And then here I've got one that's about here, and it's about this width, all right? So just for ballpark, we can see that now we've got a door here, a window here, and a window here. So let's take a look at how we can now make that into a room with doors and windows. We said before that it's really nice to get rid of or hide the things that don't matter. Now what we want to do is we want to select those wall faces so that we can extrude. We don't care about this stuff. So what I can do is go into face select mode, select, circle select, and I can select all these faces, and I can hit the H key and hide them. So now I'm just working on the walls. So I can go A, I can go over here to extrude, and I can extrude that up. And all I need to do is verify that I've extruded it up by about 7 or 8 feet. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what I can do is I can go into X-ray mode and select this, and I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's make it 7.5, something like that. So now I've got my outline of my room. Now the one thing that we're missing is the top and bottom of these windows. So how are we going to do a top and bottom of the windows? Well, there's one tool that is going to be very, very useful. And unfortunately, when you access it over here on the left, the knife tool, it doesn't work as well. So I like to use the keyboard shortcut. Luckily, K is the keyboard shortcut for knife. But there are some options we're going to have to include with that. So the bottom of my windows is 4 feet from the floor. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be about here is the bottom of my windows for both windows. So I'm going to use the knife tool and I'm going to hit K, and I'm going to add a option of C, which cuts right through all of these faces. And the reason I'm going to do that, because remember, these are not just planes, they're multiple faces. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 faces from front to back. So we're going to have to cut through all of those. So I'm going to do K and C to do a knife that cuts all the way through, and I want to do it in the x-axis. I want to make sure it's perfectly straight along this x-axis. You can see over here, x. So I'm going to add an X, and I'll go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, left click, drag, and you can see it brings us, it forces us along this x-axis. Let go, left click to do it, and then enter to confirm. All right, so KCX, left click and drag, left click again, and then enter. So unfortunately, it's a little bit convoluted, but it works really nicely. So now what I need to do is I need to add a top of the window. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to do KCX, and I'm going to go up here somewhere. Let's say we're maybe half a foot from the ceiling. Left click, drag, let go of the left mouse button, left click, and enter. And now we have defined the top of the windows. So at this point, we should be all set to finalize our room. So how are we going to make the openings for the doors and the windows? Well, right here, these faces right here define my door, all right? And so what we can do is, I'm in X-ray mode, face select. I can drag a box over these dots to select all 4 faces. And I'm going to use a very, very, very useful tool that allows us to take those faces and kind of merge them into an opening. And we're going to the edge, and we're going to use bridge edge loops. And when we do that, it automatically, as you can see here, it automatically takes those and makes a door opening. Wonderful, right? So bridge edge loops. I'm going to do the same thing for this door. So I'm going to move over, and I've got this door. I'm going to left click and drag, edge, bridge edge loops. All right. I'm going to do the same thing for this window. Left click and drag, edge, bridge edge loops. Same thing for this window. Left click and drag, edge, bridge edge loops. So now if we get out of X-ray, you can see, hey, we've got all of our openings. I can do Alt-H to bring the floor back, and there you go. You've got basically your entire room. And you can add to that. I mean, you can use that for building any floor layout that you can think of. So let's, for example, say, well, I want to add an internal wall. All right, let's say I forgot to add a wall, and I want to add a wall that goes here somewhere. All right, so how am I going to do that? Well, we'll go into X-ray mode, face select or edge select, and we're going to draw another 5 or 6 inch thick loop here, and then we can make that into a wall. So I'm going to go into the loop tool, bring this down, and we're going to go maybe half a foot, and we have just made our edge cut for that internal wall. But how are we going to add that internal wall? See, we've got this and we've got these faces, but I want to kind of extrude this wall up to make it a new internal wall. Well, the problem comes in, if I extrude these and extrude it up to here, I'm going to have kind of a mismatch. I'm going to have a big wall face, a 4-sided wall face, but it's not going to match these lines. So I'm going to end up having a very messy geometry. So how do I do it? Well, one way we can do it is we can delete these faces. So I'm going to go into the select, circle select, and face select mode and select that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the delete key, right click to get rid of the circle select, hit the delete key and delete faces, right? So now what I can do is I can extrude these up to the top, and what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to match them to these lines. So I'm going to hit the C key, select that and select that, and I want to extrude these up. Now, what we're going to do is, since we want to kind of match these to these faces, we're going to use a very nice feature that allows us to extrude, but each step we're going to be able to snap to these lines and then extrude again and snap to these lines and extrude again and snap to these lines, so that we're matching the geometry. All right. So to do that, we're going to come up here. See this magnet? This is a snap feature. And if I click on this, it allows us, when we're making a movement or we're using a tool, it will allow us to snap to different parts of the mesh. So I can hit this drop down and I want to snap to the vertices. So now I'm going to extrude these up and I'm going to snap them to these vertices. So how do I do that? I use my extrude tool, and then keeping my left mouse button down, I'm going to drag over. And you can see when it gets there, it gives us this circle, which means I am snapping to those vertices. So I can do it again. I'm going to move up. I can do it again and drag over, and it's snapping to those vertices. I can do it again, move it over, and it snaps to those vertices. So now I have successfully brought these faces so that they match all the way around. And then, if I want to make selections, for example, around this loop for some reason, now it's all nice and clean. Now, when you do stuff like this, it's really important that you make sure you didn't leave any mess here, like duplicate vertices, and you want to make really sure that your stuff is clean. So what I'm going to do is, I'm in edit mode. I'm going to go to vertex select. I'm going to select A, and I'm going to go to mesh cleanup. All right. You want to do a lot of cleanup to make sure everything's good. And I'm going to do merge by distance. And what that does is, it says if there's any vertices, if there's two vertices that are really close together, I'm going to merge them into one. All right. So I'm going to select that, and you can see down here on the bottom, it's got a little information down at the very bottom, removed 6 vertices. So when we did that, it snapped to the vertices, but it didn't merge them like we wanted. So now we've cleaned it up. So now we should have nice topology, what's called topology, and we should be able to select. So now we've got our room, and again, we can extend that. We can add more walls. We can make this into an entire building, but we're basically using the same process of looking at a grid and doing loop cuts and knife cuts to add any features that we want. So since we're making 3D models of real-world buildings and rooms, let's see how we would approach making some stairs. Now, stairs might seem very simple. Here we are in a default scene. They give us a cube. We're pretty much there, right? You might think, well, I've got this looks like a step. So I could go to Object and go down to Duplicate Object and right-click and move this guy out. And I could scale it up, and now I've got my next step. I could do the same thing. Just keep doing that, and I've got all my steps. Or you might think, hey, why don't we use those cool tools we used before? Go into edit mode, and I can go into face select mode, and I can select a face, and I can use this cool extrude tool. And I can extrude it over here, click this, extrude it over here, and I can do that for as many steps as I want. Yeah, you can do that, but what we're going to find out is you may not want to approach it that way. As we said before, really the best thing to do in any technical endeavor, even building 3D objects, is to design it first and think about how you're going to approach it, because you'll probably find out that this approach is going to be very time consuming, because now we got to go back and we got to say, hey, what are the measurements? Did we make the right measurements? Is it going to look right? And so let's take another look, and let's approach it from the way we discussed before, and start out with one of the most important things, and that is looking at a reference image. We all think we know what a set of stairs looks like, but here is a photograph of real stairs, and let's take a look at what is the difference between what we did and what the real stairs look like. You might notice, first of all, that the way they build these, you've got this riser, and they put a horizontal plank of thick wood here to hold your weight. And you can see it's got a lip. It comes out over this riser, and it's curved. It's got a little detail here. And, you know, maybe we're going to want to model that to make it look realistic. And also, if you get your ruler out, you're going to probably get dimensions like this in inches, 7.5 inches high and maybe 10.5 inches deep. So if you're going to want to make realistic looking stairs, you're going to have to match these dimensions fairly accurately. Because, you know, when people look at it in their subconscious, they know what stairs look like. They can't tell you why they know, but, you know, if the dimensions are off, they're going to notice. So we also notice here with this image that there's a lot of repetition, right? And one of the things in 3D modeling is you want to take advantage of repetition. And ideally, you'd like to maybe, since all of these stairs are virtually identical, you'd like to model maybe one step and then have the computer model the rest or duplicate the rest for you, right? Computers are really good at duplicating stuff and mirroring stuff. So if something is the same on the right-hand side as the left-hand side, you can just work on the right-hand side and it can mirror it and do the identical thing on the other side. In this case, we wanted to, you know, we want to be able to model one step and maybe have the computer repeat what we've done. And in this case, we got to make duplicate steps, and the computer has to shift this step over in back and then up to match the right dimensions. And it's got to do it again for this third step and so on. So we can look at modeling just one step, and thankfully Blender can do the duplication for us, and it can even move the second step back and up and the third step back and up, and it's got a function that will do that. So let's look at building kind of a cross section of this lower step, and maybe we can extrude it and then tell Blender, hey, here's my steps, can you duplicate it for me so I don't have to go through all of that. So let's look at how we might approach making kind of a cross section of this step that we can start out and use. So let's go into object mode, get rid of this guy, and we're going to use our friend, the orthogonal view. We're going to look down from above, and we're going to add a mesh, and we're going to just use a plane. And we want this plane to be a cross section of one step. And if you hit this arrow and you go down or you go up to the item, select the item, you can see it gives us a dimension of 24 inches by 24 inches. If you took your ruler out, you got dimensions something like this for typical residential stairs, 10.5 deep and 7.5 high. So let's fill those numbers in. 10.5 deep in the X dimension and 7.5 in the Y dimension. And that is the very basic outline of our step. So now what we want to do is we want to add that lip on the step. So how can we do that? Well, we saw before that we can go into edit mode and we can use our favorite loop cut, and we can hover over that, left click, and then drag it up to make a cut so we can make this lip. So then we can go into the selection. What we want to do is we want to extrude this out. So I'm in edge select mode. I select the edge and I can do an extrude and extrude that out to whatever I want. So now we've extruded and we've got basic outline. Now later on we can bevel this to make these smooth, but here we've got the basic outline. Now the tool we're going to use is going to take our basic outline and project it onto a plane and stamp the outline onto the plane. What we want to do is we just want to extract the outline from this. We don't need all of these faces. So what I want to do is I want to go into vertex select mode, select this vertex, delete vertices. And then I want to delete this vertex, delete vertices. So now I've got this edge and these edges. So now what I want to do is I want to delete just this face, but I want to leave the outline there. So I hit the delete key and it says only faces. So now I have deleted that face. So now I'm getting closer. All I need to do is get rid of this edge, delete edge, and now I've got a perfect outline. I can even delete this vertex because I don't need that. I can do what's called a dissolve of this vertex. I want to keep the edge in here, but I want to remove this vertex. So I can right click and go to dissolve vertices. And you can see it got rid of the unnecessary vertex, and all I've got is the outline. So this is perfect for what we want to do. So now we go into object mode and select this. And now what we want to do is use a new set of tools that operate on an entire object. Before, we were going into edit mode where we could address the vertices and edges and faces, but there's a whole bunch of tools that we can use that operate on the object as an entire thing. We said we want to duplicate the object, so there is a tool that we can use called the array modifier, which takes that object and duplicates it as we want it to be duplicated. So I'm going to select it in object mode, select the object, and I want to go over here to our list of properties, and down at this wrench, select the wrench, and it says add modifier, and that's an object modifier. And I click on that, and there is tons and tons of modifiers. Most of them you'll never ever use, but they're here in case you need them. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the generate, and you can tell that that generates, in our case, more objects. So we're going to generate, and we're going to generate an array. And the array modifier does exactly what we need. So it now shows us the array modifier, and it will add duplicates, as many duplicates as we want, and it will give us an offset. So we have relative offset selected, and it's giving us a fixed count of 2 objects right here, and it has given us an offset of 1, okay? So that 1 means it has taken the width, the x dimension of this first step, and it is offsetting the second one by that width of that first step. We could make it greater, and you can see we add and it goes more, but we want exactly the width of that one step. We also want to move it up in this case, the y-axis by a value of 1. So we can see click, 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 it's moving by 1, and we're right above the next step. Now, you can see here that we have a little bit of discontinuity between this step because what it's using is this total width, and it's not allowing for the fact that we've got this lip. So what we need to do is we need to modify the x by a little bit to move this over. And it might take a little tweaking. See here, 0.9. If I go to 0.9, you can see, we're real close. So we lucked out and we're real close, and we can leave it at 0.9. But you can see we've got this tiny difference, and this is really important. That's why there is this other feature called merge. And if you look at this little difference between the vertices, I can click merge, and it automatically adjusts and merges those vertices. So now we're all set. We've got our 2 steps, and I'm going to zoom out here, and I can make as many steps as I want just by adding to the count. So I can go 3 steps, 4, 5, 6, 8, and I'm going to go up to 16 steps. So why 16 steps? Well, if you go over here to this really nice measure tool, click on it, and then go up here, click your mouse, and bring it down, you can see it's about 120 inches from the bottom floor to the top floor. And that is, since there's 12 inches to a foot, that's 10 feet. And that is very typical here in the US of the floor to floor height. So 16 steps is very typical. So now we've got our steps and everything looks perfect. So what I can do is I can go apply that and make this into a new object. So I'm going to hit the drop down, apply, and the modifier goes away. We have now created a brand new object, and we're going to name it cutout. And we're going to name it that because we are going to use that to cut out a plane that we can then extrude. All right. So it's fairly simple to make this cutout. I'm going to do a little bit of editing to make it a little bit easier for us. I'm going to go in vertex mode. I'm going to select this and extend that. And then I'm going to go down here to the bottom one, and I'm going to extrude in the x-axis. And there is a shortcut, EX, and I'm going to extrude that over here. So now I've got my cutout ready to stamp onto a plane. So now all I have to do is add our plane, our mesh plane, and here's our plane. And I'm going to go up to the selection and click on this and hit the S for scale, and I'm going to scale that up so that I can match it to our stairs cutout. So the way you do that, a little bit complicated, but not too bad. First you select the plane in object mode. Then you go into edit mode, and over here in the list of everything in the object, I want to shift select that cutout. And now I can go to mesh, knife project, click that, and it has just projected onto the plane. To see it, I can go back to object mode, select my plane object, and go into edit mode, and you can see here's the vertices and edges that have been stamped onto the plane. Object mode, I can select my cutout, hit the H key like we showed before, go back to the plane, hit edit mode, and now we have our cutout plane. And you can see if we go into face select mode, I can select this, and this is a separate plane. And I can hit delete faces, and now we have our plane that we can just extrude into a set of steps. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to grab this, move it around, hit Control so we get 90 degrees exactly. And what I can do is I can now go into edit mode, and I can go into, I can select this guy and go into extrude, and I can pull it out, and voila, here is our steps. Now, one thing we mentioned that we always have to do, because nothing in the world has perfect edges, we're going to have to select the edges that we want to bevel. So to do that, we go into our favorite orthogonal view, and we're going to go select this, go into edit mode, and go into the X-ray mode. We can go into edge select mode, and we can box select, and it will select only those edges on the corners of these steps, and it will also select the edges down here. So what we can do now is we can apply a bevel, and we'll zoom in so we can see what we're doing, and we can apply the bevel, pull the bevel out, and add some our scroll wheel, and add some cuts to it. And now you can see we go back to object mode, and that is our beveled stairs. So real nice. So you can see that there are techniques, and you just have to get used to trying things out and thinking about before you model something. Think about how the best way to approach it, and always try to take advantage of duplication and symmetry. Symmetry means if an object like a human, the right side and the left side are the same, the computer, you can work on the right side and the computer can automatically duplicate. In this case, it can duplicate objects as a whole, and it can help you a lot. So that's about it for this one. In upcoming videos in the series, we're going to be talking about lights and images and colors and compositing and rendering and a whole bunch of other aspects of 3D computer graphics. So if you like any of these videos, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.